The first thing I saw was my wife's hand in another man's. The second thing I saw was his face, Daniel Carter, her ex. I was sitting inside my black SUV across the street from a quiet little restaurant in Manhattan, staring through the rain-streaked window at the woman I'd trusted more than anyone in the world. My wife, Emily, the woman I'd given everything to. The woman who had once slept on a broken couch because she couldn't afford a hotel room. The woman who had stood beside me when my company was collapsing and told me, "You don't need an empire to be worth loving." And now she was sitting across from the man she'd sworn was no longer part of her life. But what made my stomach turn wasn't that she was meeting him. It was what Daniel placed on the table. Between them, a thick black folder. Emily opened it, looked at the papers inside, and whispered something I couldn't hear. Then Daniel leaned forward and said 4 words that changed everything. "You have to tell him." Emily shook her head. "No, not yet. I should have walked into that restaurant. I should have demanded an explanation instead." I sat there in silence, because something inside me was screaming that if I confronted her too soon, I'd never learn the truth. And I had no idea that the truth would eventually make me question the single biggest decision of my life. 3 years earlier, Emily had been a stranger. I was 39 years old, the CEO of Carter Global, a company my father had built from a small shipping business into a multinational empire worth more than $4 billion. I'd spent most of my adult life surrounded by people who wanted something from me. Investors wanted my signature. Executives wanted my approval. Women wanted my name. Even some of my closest friends seemed to measure our friendship by what I could do for them. Then one night, I met a woman who didn't seem impressed by any of it. It happened during a charity event my company was hosting at a luxury hotel in Chicago. I had just stepped away from the ballroom when I noticed a young woman arguing quietly with a security guard near the service entrance. She was wearing a simple black dress that looked like it had been bought for the occasion, not designed for it. Her shoes were slightly worn. She had no expensive jewelry, no designer handbag, nothing that suggested she belonged among the millionaires and celebrities inside. The guard was telling her she couldn't enter. "I was invited," she said. "By whom?" She hesitated, then she looked at the invitation in her hand. "By the Carter Foundation." The guard laughed. "You're not on the guest list." I stepped forward. "She is with me." The guard immediately moved aside. Emily looked at me and frowned. "I don't need rescuing." I almost smiled. "I didn't say you did." "Then why did you interfere?" "Because you're arguing with the wrong person." She looked at the guard, then back at me. "And you're the right person. I own the hotel." She stared at me for a second, then she said, "That's unfortunate." I laughed. It was the first time anyone had spoken to me like that in years. Later that night, I discovered she worked 2 jobs and had volunteered to help the foundation because her younger brother had received a medical grant from it years earlier. She hadn't come to meet wealthy people. She hadn't come looking for a husband. She hadn't even known who I was. And somehow, that made me want to know everything about her. Over the next several months, Emily became the only person around whom I didn't feel like a billionaire. She didn't care about my cars. She didn't care about my penthouse. She didn't care about the company. When I complained about a difficult board meeting, she didn't offer investment advice. She simply asked, "Did you eat?" When I told her I was exhausted, she didn't tell me to take a vacation. She made me soup. And when I once asked why she wasn't interested in the life I could give her, she looked at me and said something I'll never forget. "Because if I love the life you can give me, I'll never know whether I love you." 6 months later, I asked her to marry me. She cried. Not because I had given her a diamond, because she thought I was making a mistake. "I don't want your money, Ethan." "I know." "I don't want your company." "I know." "I don't want to become someone people think married you for your wealth." "Then don't." She looked at me. "How?" Keep being the woman who didn't know who I was. She smiled through her tears, and she became my wife. For the first year, everything was perfect. Then, my father died. His death left me with more than grief. It left me with a board of directors that wanted control. My father's will required me to restructure the company or risk losing several major divisions. I spent months fighting legal battles, negotiating with shareholders, and working 18-hour days. Emily never complained. She would sit in my office at midnight while I worked. Sometimes she'd fall asleep on the couch. Sometimes she'd leave a cup of coffee beside me and quietly walk out. One night, I found her asleep with a financial report resting on her chest. I picked it up. She had been reading it, not because she understood the business, because she wanted to understand what was destroying me. That was when I made the biggest decision of my life. I transferred controlling ownership of Carter Global to her, not because I wanted to escape responsibility, not because I was dying, because I wanted to protect the woman who had never asked me for anything. The lawyers told me I was crazy. My board called it reckless. My chief financial officer asked me privately if I had lost my mind. I didn't care. On the morning I signed the papers, I placed them in front of Emily. She stared at them. Then she looked at me. "What's this?" "Your company." She laughed nervously. "Ethan, stop. I'm not joking." Her smile disappeared. "You're giving me Carter Global. I'm giving you control." Her eyes filled with tears. "Why?" I reached across the table and took her hand. "Because I've spent my entire life building something I thought would protect me. You taught me that love is the only thing that ever actually did." She started crying, then she pushed the papers back toward me. "I don't want this." "You don't have to want it." "Then why give it to me?" "Because I trust you." That sentence would come back to haunt me. 6 months later, I saw her with Daniel, the same man who had once been her boyfriend. The man she had told me was part of a life she'd left behind. The next morning, I confronted her. "Who were you with last night?" She froze. For 1 second, I saw something in her eyes that frightened me. Not guilt. Fear. "Who told you?" I stared at her. "So you were there." She closed her eyes. "Ethan, why didn't you tell me?" "I couldn't." "Couldn't?" She looked at me. "There are things you don't understand." "Then help me understand." She said nothing. That silence hurt more than any confession could have. I walked away. For the next several days, our house became a battlefield of silence. She didn't leave me. I didn't ask her to. But something had changed. Then I discovered something even worse. Daniel wasn't just Emily's ex. He was a former employee of Carter Global. And 3 weeks before I saw them together, someone had attempted to transfer nearly $70 million from one of our private accounts. The transaction had been stopped, but the authorization had come from an executive-level system. My system, the same system Emily now controlled. Suddenly, the meeting with Daniel looked very different. I hired a private investigator. Within 48 hours, he found something disturbing. Daniel had been meeting Emily for months. Not once. Not twice. 7 times. Every meeting happened at different locations: restaurants, parking garages, a public library, a hotel lobby, and every time, Emily carried documents. But there was one detail that made no sense. Daniel had never contacted Emily romantically. No messages saying he missed her. No secret hotel rooms. No photographs of them behaving like lovers. Every conversation seemed focused on Carter Global. I didn't know whether that made me feel better or worse. Then my investigator found an old file. It contained Daniel's employment records. He had worked for my father 15 years earlier, and he had been fired after accusing one of the company's senior executives of stealing money. The executive was still with Carter Global. His name was Richard Hale, my father's closest friend, my company's current chairman, and the man who had opposed my decision to give Emily control. I confronted Richard. He looked genuinely offended. "Are you accusing me of stealing?" "I haven't accused you of anything." "You're investigating me Because someone tried to move $70 million. Richard leaned closer. Be careful, Ethan. Your wife is the one with access now. That sentence stayed with me that night. I went home and found Emily sitting alone in the kitchen. She looked exhausted. I know about Daniel, I said. She didn't move. I know about the meetings. Her face went pale. Ethan. And I know about the $70 million. She looked at me. For the first time since I'd met her, she looked completely broken. I didn't steal anything. Then tell me what you're doing. She started crying. I was trying to protect you. From what? She couldn't answer. I stepped closer. Emily, I gave you my entire empire because I trusted you. If you don't trust me enough to tell me the truth, then what exactly did I give you? She looked down, then she whispered, Your father didn't build the empire alone. I stared at her. What does that mean? Your father covered something up. She pulled a small envelope from her bag. Inside was an old photograph. My father, Richard, and Daniel's father, standing together outside a warehouse. On the back was a date from 15 years earlier. I looked at Emily. Where did you get this? Daniel. Why? Because his father disappeared after accusing Richard of stealing from Carter Global. My heart stopped. Emily continued. Daniel didn't come back into my life because he wanted me. He came back because he needed someone who had access to the company records. I looked at her. And you? I agreed to help him because I knew something was wrong. Why didn't you tell me? Because every time I tried, someone stopped me. Who? She looked directly at me. Your chairman, Richard. The man I'd trusted since childhood. The man who had sat beside my father. The man who had watched me marry Emily. Suddenly, everything made sense. The attempted transfer, the secret meetings, the documents, the fear in Emily's eyes. But there was still one question. Why didn't Daniel come to me? Emily shook her head. He did. What? Twice. She pulled another document from the envelope. Both messages had been sent to my private email. I had never received them. Someone had intercepted them. I looked at the dates. Both were from months earlier. Both warned me about Richard. I felt sick. Then my phone rang. It was my investigator. His voice was urgent. Mr. Carter, you need to get home. Why? We found the person accessing your private system. My heart started pounding. Who? There was a pause. Then he said, Richard Hale. I looked at Emily. She was already standing. We drove straight to Carter Global. Richard was waiting inside the executive conference room. He didn't look surprised. In fact, he smiled. You finally figured it out. I walked toward him. You stole from my company. He shrugged. Your father knew. That sentence hit me harder than anything else. My father knew. He knew everything. Richard explained that years earlier, he and my father had created secret accounts to hide losses from investors. The money was supposed to be temporary, but Richard kept taking it. When Daniel's father discovered the truth, he threatened to expose them. My father protected Richard, and Daniel's father lost everything. I looked at Emily. She was crying silently. Richard laughed. And then you handed your company to a woman who had no idea what she was holding. No, I said. She knew exactly what she was holding. Richard's smile disappeared. Emily stepped forward. I spent 6 months rebuilding the audit trail. Richard looked at her in disbelief. You? Yes. She placed a stack of documents on the table. Every transfer, every hidden account, every shell company. Richard's face changed. You don't understand what you've done. Emily looked at him calmly. I understand exactly what I've done. She turned toward me. I didn't meet Daniel because I wanted him back. Her voice broke. I met him because his father deserved the truth. I walked toward her. And you kept all of this from me because you thought I wouldn't believe you. She nodded. I was afraid that if Richard knew I had told you, he'd destroy the evidence. I looked at the woman I'd almost accused of betraying. me, then I realized something painful. She had never been trying to take my empire. She had been protecting it. And she had been protecting me. Richard was arrested weeks later. The investigation uncovered years of financial fraud. Daniel's father was finally cleared of the accusations that had destroyed his reputation, and Carter Global survived. But the most important thing that happened had nothing to do with the company. A month after everything ended, Emily and I sat together on the balcony of our home. The city lights stretched beneath us. She looked at me. "Do you still trust me?" I took her hand. "I trusted you when I thought you betrayed me." She smiled sadly. "And now I understand why." She rested her head on my shoulder. I looked at her and thought about the day I'd given her my entire empire. Back then, I thought I was giving her everything. I was wrong. She had already given me something worth far more than billions. She had given me the truth when telling it could have destroyed her. She had protected my name when she could have walked away, and she had stood beside me when I had every reason to doubt her. I had once believed that the greatest thing I could give my wife was my empire, but sitting there beside her, I finally understood. The empire was never mine to give. The real gift was trust, and she had earned every bit of it.